It's 11 p.m. The kids are in bed. The house is quiet. And Mark, 47 years old, $87,000 in his 401k, is sitting at the kitchen table running the numbers. Again, third time this month. He knows the rule of 72. He's read the books. He's listened to the podcasts. He can explain compound interest to you right now if you asked. But every time he looks at that account, $87,000 at 47, and then looks at the $2 million number that every video talks about, it doesn't feel like a plan. It feels like a story about someone else. I've been close to that feeling. Knowing the theory and actually living inside the theory are two completely different things. And here's what I keep hearing in the comments from people who are 40, 45, 50 years old. I know all of this. I just can't make it work. It's not that you don't know the math. It's that the math on the screen doesn't match the reality in your bank account. So if the theory is so simple, why does it feel like your account is standing still? That's the real question. And it's not because you're behind. It's not because you started too late. It's because most of what gets taught about early retirement only shows you the destination. Nobody shows you what year 2 looks like. Nobody shows you year 3. And that's exactly where most people quit. Today, I'm not going to teach you about compound interest again. What I'm going to show you is why most people stop right at the moment when everything is about to shift, and what it actually looks like to get through it. There's a quiet phase of this process that usually gets skipped in the highlight reels. Compound interest doesn't feel like anything for a long time, not because it isn't working, but because in the early years, 100% of your momentum comes from you. Every single dollar of growth is a dollar you put in. There's no engine running in the background yet. It's just you every month doing the thing. And let's be honest, our brains just aren't wired to get excited about nothing happening for months. We're wired to respond to immediate feedback. You work out, you feel sore the next day. That's feedback. You skip a meal, you feel hungry. Feedback. But you contribute $500 to your index fund this month and check the balance 2 weeks later. The number barely moved. Sometimes it went down. The brain registers that as, this isn't working. That feeling isn't a character flaw. It's just how the system is built. And nobody warns you about it. Think about 2 people, same age, 35. Both read the same FIRE book in 2015. Both started that same year with the same intention. Person A kept going. Person beef. After 3 years, seeing $38,000 in the account, when they'd imagined something closer to $500,000, stopped. Used the money to renovate the kitchen. Made sense at the time. Fast forward to a backyard BBQ in 2025. Person A has $280,000. Person B has $0 in a brokerage account and a very nice kitchen. That's not a story about discipline. That's a story about not understanding what year 3 is supposed to look like. So let me show you what it actually looks like. $500 a month, 10% average return. Year 3, you have roughly $20,000. You've put in $18,000. The market added maybe $2,000. That's the invisible phase. That's where it feels like nothing is happening. Year 7, about $57,000. You start to feel something. Year 10, roughly $102,000. And here's the part that matters. For the first time, the money is growing faster than you're contributing. The engine is finally running. 70% of your total 10-year return happens in the last 3 years. Which means if you quit early, you're basically paying the full price for a meal you never stayed to eat. So the person who quits at year 5, they paid 5 years of patience to earn the right to the part that actually compounds, and then walked away right before collecting it. Fidelity reported that the average 401k balance for people 45 to 54 is around $168,000. The median, meaning half of all people in that age range, is $60,763. That gap between average and median tells you something. A small number of people are doing very well, and a large number of people are stuck right where the invisible phase leaves them. That's not because those people are bad with money. It's because nobody explained that this phase is normal and that it ends. The Federal Reserve's 2022 survey of consumer finances found that 37% of American households have no retirement savings at all, not behind, none. Which means for a significant portion of people, the invisible phase never even got started. If you're watching this and you're behind, or you started and stopped, that doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you don't understand the math. It means you were running a race where nobody told you what mile 3 was supposed to feel like. The invisible phase is real. It's uncomfortable, and it has a specific end date. If you stay in it long enough to get there. Quitting at year 5 doesn't just cost you 5 years. It costs you the entire return you already paid 5 years of contributions to unlock. That's the actual trade-off. So here's the real question, and this is the one most videos skip entirely. What if you're already 45? What if you have $50,000 in the account and you can only save $800 a month? Does the 10-year plan still work? The answer isn't yes or no. It depends on a number that almost nobody teaches you how to calculate. Most people think the retirement problem is an income problem. Earn more, invest more, retire sooner. That's the equation. And it's not wrong, but it's incomplete. Because income is only one side of it. Jennifer and David worked at the same company. Same salary. $85,000 in 2018. Same starting point. By 2022, Jennifer had gotten a raise to $110,000. Real money. She upgraded her apartment, traded in her car, started taking one international trip a year. She earned it, so she spent it. Her monthly investment contribution stayed at $400. David didn't get the big raise, but he picked up some consulting work on the side. Brought in an extra $25,000 a year. He didn't change how he lived. He just moved most of that extra income straight into his brokerage account. His monthly contribution went from $600 to $1,400. By 2028, David is ahead by roughly $180,000. Not because he earned more, because he kept the gap open between what came in and what went out. That gap is the whole game. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey found that the average American household spends about 5.8% more when their income goes up, meaning nearly all of the raise gets absorbed, almost automatically, into a higher baseline of living, not through bad decisions, just through the quiet process of normalizing a new lifestyle. We've all experienced this. It's called hedonic adaptation. It's why the new car smell wears off after a few weeks. Your brain adjusts to the new normal within about 3 to 6 months. The upgraded apartment stops feeling like an upgrade. It just feels like home. And then cutting back feels like losing something, even though a year ago you were living fine without it. That's the mechanism. It's not a willpower problem. It's just your brain doing what it was designed to do. Get used to the good stuff. So when we talk about the two levers, offense and defense, here's what we actually mean. Offense is increasing income, and yes, you should pursue it. But understand what $500 more per month actually does you. At 10% return over 10 years, that's not $6,000. That's roughly $102,000. Every dollar of additional income, compounded, is worth significantly more than face value. That's why offense matters. But defense is what most people underestimate. A.T. Rowe Price survey from 2024 found that 43% of Americans say lifestyle inflation is the main reason they're not saving enough. Not low income. Not high expenses they can't control. Lifestyle inflation. The slow, invisible rise in spending that follows every raise. Jennifer earns $110,000 and invests $400 a month. That's about 4.4% of gross income going to work. David earns effectively $110,000 combined and invests $1,400 a month, about 15%. Run both scenarios out 10 years at 10% return. Jennifer ends up with roughly $285,000. David ends up with roughly $570,000. The difference is $285,000. Not from income, from the decision about what to do when income went up. That's the cost of lifestyle creep, not in theory, but in an actual dollar amount sitting in someone else's account. Now, you already know offense and defense as concepts. That part isn't new. But here's the question nobody actually answers, given your specific number today. Your income, your current savings rate, your age. How much offense do you need? How much defense is leaking? And do you actually know where you stand right now? Most videos call that a plan and stop there. I don't think that's enough. Here's the problem with how early retirement gets taught. Every video gives you a destination. $1 million, $2 million, retire in 10 years. And then it shows you a chart of what happens if you start at 30 and invest consistently for 30 years. The math is correct. The chart is real. But nobody tells you how to measure where you are right now. And that's why people quit. Not because they're lazy. Not because the math is wrong. Because they have no unit of progress. They're running a race with no mile markers. Just a finish line somewhere in the distance that keeps looking the same distance away. I used to think retiring early meant never having to work again. That was the goal, full stop. But the first time I sat down and actually calculated how much of my monthly expenses my passive income was covering, something shifted. It wasn't a big number. It wasn't impressive. But it was a real number. And for the first time, the plan felt like it existed in the same world I was living in, not just on a spreadsheet. What I realized I actually wanted wasn't to stop working. It was to be able to say no to things I didn't want to do and yes to things I chose. Those are different problems, and they need a different measurement. The way I track this is actually pretty straightforward. Take your monthly passive income. Dividends, REIT distributions, interest from a high-yield savings account, whatever is coming in without you actively working for it. Divide that by your monthly living expenses. Multiply by 100. That's your freedom meter. That's your percentage of financial freedom right now, today. Sandra, 49 years old, ran this number for the first time. $400 a month in passive income. $3,200 a month in expenses. Freedom meter 12.5%. She'd been telling herself she hadn't done anything. But 12.5% means, if she wanted to, she could negotiate a 4-day work week and her passive income would cover the income gap from that one day. She's not retired. But she has an option she didn't know she had. That's what the number does. It makes the progress visible. The goal isn't to jump straight to 100%. The goal is to move the number 10% at a time, because at each 10% milestone, something concrete changes. At 10%, you have enough leverage to ask for flexible hours and mean it. At 25%, you could take a 3-month sabbatical without draining everything you have. At 50%, part-time work becomes optional, not a financial necessity. At 100%, work is a choice. Most people watching this don't want to do nothing. What they want is optionality. The freedom meter measures exactly that. Let's make it concrete. Say your monthly expenses are $4,000. Your current passive income is $200 a month, coming from roughly $30,000 sitting in an index fund. Freedom meter, 5%. To get to 10%, you need $400 a month in passive income. That means roughly another $30,000 invested in a similar portfolio. If you're saving $800 a month, You're looking at about 3 years to get there. 3 years to go from 5% to 10% freedom. Can you see 3 years? Most people can. 3 years is a performance review cycle. 3 years is a car loan. 3 years is something the brain can hold on to. And at 10%, you have something most Americans don't have: a choice. The first time my passive income covered my electricity bill and groceries, it didn't make me feel wealthy. Being wealthy is fine, but feeling lighter, knowing your electric bill is covered forever, is much better. Wealthy is a number. Lighter is a feeling you get when one corner of your life stops being contingent on whether someone else decides to keep you employed. That's what 10% does. So here's where I'll leave a simple template in the description. No email required, no sign up. Just a straightforward way to calculate your own freedom meter with 3 numbers: your monthly expenses, your total portfolio value, and your current yield. That's it. But knowing your freedom meter is only part of it. To actually move that number, you need to be building the right type of portfolio for the stage you're in right now. And this is where most people in their 40s and 50s make a structural mistake that costs them years. Knowing your freedom meter is one thing. Building a portfolio that actually moves it, that's where the structure matters. Most people in their 40s and 50s are running the same portfolio they set up in their 30s. Most people are still leaning on the same high-growth strategy they picked in their 30s, which starts to feel a lot riskier at 50. For a 32-year-old with 30 years of runway, that makes sense. For a 50-year-old with a 10-year window, it's a different calculation entirely. Here's the framework: 3 layers. Each one does a different job. The first layer is your growth engine: broad index funds, VTI, VOO, total market exposure. This is the long-term compounding machine. You don't touch it, you don't time it, you just feed it consistently and let it run. The second layer is your income producers: dividend stocks, REITs, assets that generate cash flow on a regular basis. This is the layer that directly moves your freedom meter. Every dollar of monthly passive income you add comes from here. Growth is invisible for years. Income shows up in your account every quarter. The third layer is your stability layer: bonds, cash reserves, a high-yield savings account. This isn't exciting. It's not supposed to be. It's the buffer that keeps one bad year in the market from forcing a decision you can't undo. Robert had $320,000 in 2008. He was 52. Almost all of it was in S&P 500 index funds, roughly 90% of his portfolio in a single growth layer. Over the next 14 months, the market dropped 38%. On paper, he lost $121,000. He didn't sell, but he also didn't sleep. Years later, he said, "If I'd had 20% in bonds and dividend stocks, I still would have lost money. But I wouldn't have lost my nerve, and I wouldn't have come that close to panic selling." He didn't make a bad choice in 2008. He made a choice in 2003 that stopped making sense by 2008. The portfolio that was right for him at 46 wasn't right for him at 52. That's the piece most frameworks miss. The ratio between these 3 layers isn't fixed. It shifts as your freedom meter moves. Here's how to think about it. Think of it as shifting from all-out speed to reliable cruising as you get closer. When you're between 0 and 20% on the freedom meter, you prioritize the engine with 70% in growth, 20% in income, and 10% in stability. As you move toward 50%, you shift to 50% growth, 30% income, and 20% stability, which is where the income layer starts doing visible work. Once you cross that 50% mark, preservation matters as much as growth, so you might move to 30% growth, 40% income, and 30% stability. A 40% market crash at this stage shouldn't send you back to full-time work. Vanguard's target retirement fund model does something similar automatically. It shifts the bond-stock ratio as the target date approaches. The logic is the same. The closer you are to needing the money, the less volatility you can absorb without it costing you real options. Morningstar looked at dividend-focused portfolios versus pure growth portfolios across a 24-year window from 2000 to 2024. The dividend-focused portfolios had roughly 23% lower volatility. That matters less when you're 35. It matters a great deal when you're 52 and a bad sequence of returns can compress your timeline by years. This isn't about being conservative. It's about matching the structure to the stage. The person at 35 needs the engine running at full speed. The person at 50 needs the engine running, and also needs to know that one crash won't erase the progress it took a decade to build. You're not starting over. You're optimizing what you already have. Now, I want to show you what actually happens to two people with the same income, same age, same starting point. One builds this structure. One doesn't. Not after 10 years. After 5. Because 5 years is where most people decide whether they're in or out. Let's go back to Mark. Year 3. $22,000 in his brokerage account. He's been at this for 36 months, contributing every month, not missing. And the number still feels small. His neighbor just pulled into the driveway with a new Tesla. And Mark is sitting there thinking, is this actually going anywhere? This is the moment. Not year 1, when everything feels new. Not year 7, when momentum is visible. Year 3, when you've paid enough in to feel the cost, but haven't stayed long enough to feel the return. This is where the two paths split. Here's what the math says about that decision. Scenario A, Mark stays. $22,000 already in, plus $800 a month for 7 more years at 10% return. He ends up with roughly $220,000 at year 10. Scenario B, Mark quits at year 3, pulls the money out. After the early withdrawal penalty and income tax, he walks away with maybe $17,000. Then 7 years of not investing. That $198,000 isn't just a number. It's the cost of having to start the invisible phase all over again from zero. Because what you're giving up isn't what's in the account today. It's everything the account was about to become. Two people, same starting point, 5 years later. Without the framework, income goes up, spending follows. Freedom meter stays at 0 to 5%. No buffer when the market drops or a layoff hits. By 58, Social Security is less of a supplement and more of the plan. Every major expense arrives as a crisis. With the framework, income goes up, investment rate goes up. Freedom meter moves 3 to 5% a year. Passive income starts covering fixed monthly costs. By 58, there's a real choice: work part-time, switch careers, or step back entirely. Not because you hit a magic number, because you built enough optionality that the decision is yours. These two paths don't start diverging at year 10. They diverge at year 2 and 3. That's what quit right here actually means. Honestly, I've felt that pull too. The urge to take the money and do something with it you can actually see and touch right now. That feeling is completely normal. The question isn't whether you feel it. The question is whether you have a system that's stronger than the feeling. Retire in 10 years isn't a guarantee. It's a type of optionality. When your freedom meter hits 60 to 70%, you don't have to stop working. You just stop having to. That gap between working because you want to and working because you're afraid not to, that's worth at least $198,000. Probably more. So what does the system look like in practice? 3 steps, not theory, things you can do this week. I want to tell you something about the person who watches every video, listens to every podcast, knows every framework, and still hasn't moved. It's not because they're lazy. It's because nobody gave them a specific first step. Not a concept, a step. Here are 3 you can take this week. Step 1, calculate your freedom meter today. 15 minutes. You can't optimize what you haven't measured. Right now, most people have a vague sense of I'm not where I should be, and vague is the enemy of progress. The freedom meter gives you a baseline, A real number. Marcus, 46, ran the calculation for the first time and got 7%. He'd been telling himself he had almost nothing. But 7% meant his passive income was already covering his electricity, water, and internet every month. Not nothing. A start with a specific next target. 3 numbers is all you need. Your monthly expenses, your total portfolio value, and your current yield. That's it. Passive income divided by monthly expenses times 100. Write it down. If you don't know where you are, your brain will default to nowhere. And people abandon plans that feel like they're going nowhere. Step 2. Set up an automatic investment transfer. 30 minutes, one time. The moment your paycheck hits your account is the moment you make a decision, consciously or not. Most people invest whatever is left at the end of the month. Linda, 44, did exactly that for years. 11 out of 12 months, nothing left. The month she set up an auto transfer of $600 on payday. She didn't miss a single contribution in the next 18 months. Vanguard's research shows that investors who automate contributions invest 83% more per year than those who invest manually. I wish I'd seen that kind of difference early on. It's not about earning more, it's just making the decision once instead of fighting yourself every month. Set the transfer. Pick the amount. Imperfect is fine. Let the system run. Compound needs consistency, not perfection. Step 3. Increase your investment rate by 1% every time you get a raise. You won't feel it. That's the point. Kevin, 41, got a 4% raise, about $3,000 a year. Instead of letting all of it flow into lifestyle, he bumped his investment rate by 1.5%. It didn't change how his day-to-day life felt. He did that 5 times over 8 years. His investment rate went from 8% to 15.5% without a single painful cut. Fidelity's data shows that increasing your contribution rate by just 1% per year adds over $100,000 to your portfolio over 20 years on a $60,000 income baseline. Seeing that $100,000 figure makes me wish I hadn't let those early raises disappear into my lifestyle. Every raise is an opportunity to move your freedom meter. You can take it or let lifestyle absorb it. That opportunity doesn't come back. I don't know what the right numbers look like for you specifically. I don't know your age, your balance, your obligations, but I know this: $50 a month, automated and compounded over 10 years, beats a perfect plan that never gets started. Any number. Automated, consistent. That's the whole system. And when you start watching your freedom meter move from 7% to 8%, then to 10%, you'll understand why I keep saying most people quit right here. Because they quit right before the number started showing them they were moving. 3 things to keep in mind before you go. The invisible phase is a normal part of the process, and it does have an end date. You can't skip it, but you can definitely outlast it. The Freedom Meter gives you a way to track progress today, not 10 years from now. You don't have to wait for 50% for it to matter. 7% counts. 12% counts. Every 10% jump gives you a real choice you didn't have before. And the 3 steps we talked about don't require a massive income or a perfect budget. They just need a system that keeps running even on the months when you aren't feeling motivated. This is how I look at early retirement. For some people, 10 years is realistic. For others, it's 15, or maybe it's just stepping back to 70% capacity. The exact number isn't the point. The point is reaching a place where money stops making your decisions for you. To me, that's the finish line that actually matters. Think about Mark again, the guy at the kitchen table at 11 p.m. If he sticks with it past year 3, year 7 looks completely different. His passive income starts covering the mortgage. His freedom meter crosses 20%. And for the first time in 20 years, he has a choice that isn't based on fear. That's not just retirement. That's having options. I don't know exactly where you are on your journey, But the fact that you're still watching tells me you're ready to move. Leave a comment with your Freedom Meter percentage today. Don't worry about it being perfect or rounded up. Just give me the real number. I read every single one. And if you want to know exactly how to build that income layer for your portfolio, especially if you're starting after 40, check out the next video. That's where we get into where the passive income actually comes from.